From the MOSSAD files, it's a video extra. I'm Dan Raviv, former CBS correspondent, author or co-author of books about Israel and the Middle East, and host of the audio podcast every week called the MOSSAD Files. We do a video special when we have an especially important and impressive guest, as we do today. Dr. Kobi Michael, you joined from Israel, where you are on the staff as a researcher of INSS, the National Security Studies Institute, which is in Ramat Aviv, near the big city, as well as being a researcher and senior scholar at the Misgav Institute. And I know you've taught all around the world, including in the UK. So thank you very much, Kobi Michael. At this time, I really want to ask you the recovery of the last hostage. Yes, a dead hostage, Ron Gvili. That seemed huge in Israel, as though it changed the mood. So on Tuesday, what did you observe when the news came that after going through so many bodies in a cemetery in Gaza, that the Israeli troops and forensic scientists had identified Ron Gvili? What did you feel and observe?
I think that almost every Israeli, we felt that there is a sort of uniqueness of the Jewish people, of the Israeli people, that does not exist in any other place in the world. The idea of mutual commitment, the idea of solidarity, the idea that hundreds of soldiers were busy for 48 hours to dig a complete cemetery in the Gaza Strip in order to take out hundreds of corpses and to check each one of them in order to reach to the last hostage, Ran Gvili, and the idea that we have succeeded to bring everybody back home, live or dead, and we are talking about 255 hostages. 4 of them, by the way, were there before October 7th. Yeah. In October 7th, we held 251. And we have succeeded in doing that under the chaotic circumstances of the Gaza Strip, under the war circumstances, and all the demolition, all the destruction that we are facing there in the Gaza Strip. And when we have to deal with Hamas, a terror organization, a Nazi terror organization, this is something that is almost unbelievable. And I think that it was such a big relief for the entire Israeli society, and something that brought everybody together and gave us the sense of being united. For at least, several hours, we forgot all the political arguments and disputes, and even those who have so many critics against Prime Minister Netanyahu and the current government. I mean, everybody was part of this big, huge story of Ran Gvili. He became to be a sort of a symbol. All the hostages, by the way, became to be symbols of the Israeli society. They became to be even, sort of celebs in the Israeli media, because it is a very sensitive issue for the Israeli society. And here, mainly because of the trauma of October 7th, that was something that the Israeli society actually has not experienced ever. It is still a very significant, very substantial trauma. And I think that this was a sort of a healing event, not less than that, healing event. And I think that everybody in Israel felt, at least for a moment or two, as part of Gvili family, not less than that.
May I ask you this, Dr. Michael, because I heard one of those IDF soldiers who had also the grisly task of, as you say, taking bodies out of the ground, checking if it's Gvili. They checked around 250 bodies. Wow, but identified him. And he said it was so emotional because it represented to me the end of the war. Now, as a serious analyst, of course, ending the hostage stage and that part of the war is over, that doesn't end the war against Hamas, the full reaction to October 7th, does it?
Yes and no. It ends the war in a sense that the very intensive, I would say, kinetic phase of this war and the open wound of this war, which was the hostages, actually are closed. We are in a different phase now. Hamas is still there in the western part of the Gaza Strip. Hamas reconstitutes itself. I don't see any real, I would say, feasibility or probability that the technocrats government will be able to govern effectively the Gaza Strip as long as Hamas is there as an organized military entity. Hamas does not intend to dismantle itself. The Turks and the Qatarians will do all the possible maneuvers in order to assure that Hamas will remain as an effective and influential actor in the Gaza Strip and beyond, because they see Hamas as a replacement of the Palestinian Authority of Fatah. And at the end of the day, the end game of Hamas, which is to gain a full control over the entire Palestinian system, which means the PLO and the PA, is something which is very welcome by Turkey and Qatar. And they will help Hamas to do that. And unfortunately, both countries are very close, or at least the leaders of both countries, mainly Erdogan, are very close to President Trump. And they can influence President Trump, and I'm sure that they will do their utmost efforts in order to be very creative and to pursue the President Trump that Hamas needs more time, and they will try to differentiate between offensive weapon and defensive weapon, and they will say that first of all the IDF has to withdraw to the international border, to the security perimeter, and so on and so forth. I hope that President Trump will be tough enough in order to push them back and not to enable it. And I think that everybody understands it. When I say everybody, it includes President Trump and his staff, that nothing good will come out of the Gaza Strip as long as Hamas is there and not disarmed.
But
And
as you said, President Trump included the leaders of Turkey and Qatar on his board of peace. That shows their influence. With Qatar, it's money and the gift of an Air Force One plane. And with Turkey, well, Trump's always admired
more
President
than that,
Erdogan.
if it
So
was,
Netanyahu has to compete with that. And if I
yes.
may bring this up, I felt that Netanyahu might have been trying to solidify his standing with Trump with that remark this week that during the Biden period, right, there was an embargo of weapons briefly to Israel, which hurt the IDF so much that some soldiers died. A very controversial remark, but perhaps Bibi felt that Trump would like that remark, yeah?
I assume, but it was a remark or a comment not only for President Trump, or it was not directed only to President Trump. It was directed to the Israeli constituency as well, and maybe even beyond. But I think that what we see here is a sort of a deal. I don't have any evidence for that. It is my assessment. But I think that it is a pretty solid assessment and a reasonable assessment that there is a sort of a strategic, substantial deal between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, and the title of the deal is Gaza for Iran. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu still believes that Iran is the head of the snake, and there is a need now to do something which is different in comparison to anything or to anything else that has been done vis-a-vis Iran. It means a regime change. And once the current Iranian regime will be toppled down, will collapse, then it will impact the entire Middle East, and it will impact negatively, of course, Hamas and Hezbollah, because Iran is the provider and the supporter of both of them, Hamas and Hezbollah. And I believe that in order to keep President Trump on the same page with him regarding Iran, he was ready to make some concessions regarding Gaza, which means that he enables President Trump and the American administration and the so-called Board of Peace, or not so-called Board of Peace, the Board of Peace, to do things in their way. And he believes that eventually President Trump will reach to the only sober and realistic conclusion that Hamas was the obstacle, is the obstacle, and will remain the obstacle as long as it will not disarm completely or in a very effective manner, and the Gaza Strip will be demilitarized. And there is no ISF. The ISF will not be established because beside Turkey, that is willing to join to the ISF under the current circumstances, there is no even a single country that is willing to send its troops to the Gaza Strip in order to fight Hamas or to dismantle Hamas, to disarm Hamas. And I think that eventually, after 2 months, 3 months, President Trump will reach to the conclusion that Hamas is not here in order to cooperate or to make a deal or to disarm itself, but on the contrary, and the only option that exists is to dismantle Hamas by the IDF, and then the IDF will have to do that to demilitarize the Gaza Strip and to facilitate the required conditions for the realization, the implementation of President Trump's plan. Okay? And I think that this is a calculated risk that Prime Minister Netanyahu took upon himself, setting the priorities, first of all, Iran, and assuring that President Trump will remain on the same page with Israel with regard to Iran, and then the Gaza Strip, which is less important than Iran now. Now, there is an agreement between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump that the reconstruction process will not begin before the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. Now, there is no demilitarization of the Gaza Strip without disarming Hamas, okay? So at least under the current circumstances, at this moment, President Trump is with us, with Israel, with regard to this condition. I don't know, maybe tomorrow, President Trump will invent a new reality because we became to be used to that President Trump from time to time invents realities, okay? And he will say that there is already demilitarization of the Gaza Strip because the Turks and the Qatarians will be able to convince him that Hamas actually disarmed itself from the offensive weapon, and now they are only with the defensive weapon, and this is demilitarization, and the next phase will be when the IDF will withdraw, and so on and so forth.
As though the U.S. should be satisfied by that. Yeah, I get your picture there. And then there'd be pressure on the Israelis to pull back, but Netanyahu would have to, frankly, stand up for Israel's point of view. But by the way, we have to make sure our viewers and listeners notice that at least on this date, January 28th, you're saying that part of what Israel hopes to see is regime change in Iran, a collapse of the Ayatollah's regime, that perhaps U.S. military action would spark that. And that's what we don't know, right? President Trump tells Iran, make a deal, promise to never have nuclear weapons, or you're going to be hit like never before.
I think that Israel will like a deal if it will be deal that will follow the conditions of President Trump himself. There are three conditions or three demands. First of all, the nuclear capacities. There will be no enrichment on the Iranian soil. There will be no military nuclear capacities. Secondly, all the ballistic missiles issue, okay, that will be limited dramatically. And thirdly, that there are no more proxies. Iranian proxies that will be fed by the Iranians with money, with weapon, with intelligence, with other things. And we are talking, of course, about first of all Hezbollah, then the Houthis in Yemen, then the Shiite militias in Iraq, and then Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Okay, and we have to remember that Iran works very hard these days in order to ignite the West Bank. Okay, and in order to prepare terror infrastructures among Arab citizens of the state of Israel inside 67 borders. Okay, they work very hard on that, and they work very hard to undermine the stability of the Jordanian kingdom in order to have another front vis-a-vis Israel. Okay, so if they will accept all of these demands of President Trump, even if Khamenei will remain the supreme leader, this is not the Iranian regime that we used to know. This is something else. But
Well,
I do not.
if they would honor such an agreement, if, well,
I, I do
you have a
not
very
believe that they're
dynamic
going.
region there in the Middle East, Kobi Michael.
Yes, indeed.
Kobi Michael, you're a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies, which is in Israel, of course, and also the Misgav Institute. You teach at the University of South Wales in the UK, and you are kind enough to give me some time here on the Mossad Files. So, Kobi Michael, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks to all of you for watching this video special from the Mossad Files. A brief reminder, you can download and subscribe to the audio podcast, The Mossad Files with Dan Raviv. I'd appreciate it. It would be very supportive. And also, I'd like to mention books that I have co-authored with Yossi Melman. One of them is Spies Against Armageddon, a history of Israeli intelligence agencies, the Mossad and the others. Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. And also we have a very affordable ebook, an exclusive story, really. It's called Target Iran. It's about how the Mossad, over the years, penetrated Iran and set up that war this past June inside that country. So for now, I'm Dan Raviv. Thanks very much.